It is Yellow Seed 11 today, and I've got a personal story. We're in the wave of revelation, the wave of whistleblowers, of shadow work, of letting go of the old and stepping into the new. And we're going to talk about the Zeitgeist movie series, which profoundly impacted me as a teenager, which helped shape decisions throughout my life and got me to leave behind the old world, eventually come to decide it's time to let go of the old and start planting the seeds of the new. How I moved to the Swedish countryside to start planting the seeds of a new world. So, welcome to the podcast where we talk about Mayan astrology to help you navigate the energies to move towards your dream life. And in the previous episode, we already talked about this wave. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Zeitgeist movie series, which was made in this wave. Both the first and the third movie were made in this energy on Red Earth 4 and on Wind 9. Now, we're going to talk about it on Seed 11 because Seed 11 is the seed, is the garden, is the womb. This is what we got from our upbringing, right? We all came from a seed, from a womb. We have this, the seed is the four walls, it's the context, the basic structure from which we came, the basic structure in which we grew up. And the Zeitgeist was something that impacted me when I was 17, not quite that young, but it certainly shaped decisions throughout my life. And this movie is also about that garden, that common context that we all grew up in. And we all have our own little garden, our own seed from which we grew. But we also have this common context for the world that we sort of, the ideas and understandings that we get brought into together, and opposite sort of, well, not opposite, but as opposed to the Blue Knight, where this is the perspective of the child that has only their own dream, right? The child sees the world through their own eyes. Well, the seed is this common context of how we, the things that we can all see, which often leave out so much of reality, right? The common context leaves out so much of what each of us actually experience in our lives. Just like our own personal context is so small a piece of the whole thing as well. Now, Seed 11 is about what plans do you want to see? What seeds do you want to plant? So, what are we moving towards? What future do you want to move towards? What intentions do you set towards a future? Do you keep planting the same seeds without thinking about it? Or are you that gardener that decides to use exactly the best seeds to create a different future? That's what this wave is all about. Can we look at what is there and say, okay, I don't want to continue that bit, but I want to continue in this direction, into this path. I want to go towards that future. Now, the Zeitgeist movies, right? This was in 2007, the first one came out. 2011 was the third one. 2011 is also when I saw it, when the Occupy movement was moving over the world. And, well, that's when we did a screening of the Zeitgeist movies. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And of course, Occupy is the wave that comes right after this. So in 2007, the Zeitgeist movies came out for the first time. In 2011, the wave after the Zeitgeist movies is where Occupy International came about, because it's kind of like a response, right? This white wave reveals what the problem is. This white wave talked about capitalism, about consumerism. And then the blue wave of Occupy started putting that into action, saying, what can we do about it? And it had a difficult time with that too, figuring out what to do. But anyways, I'm getting ahead. The Zeitgeist movies, they talked about a society that was collapsing. They said, look, this isn't working anymore. People are starting to see through the game. People are starting to see that this way of exploitation, of colonialism, of injustice, it's not working. And we are starting to get ready to move to that new world because people are seeing this isn't working. It talked about consumerism. It talked about the way the economy was structured, about the way the money system is structured, and how it will always perpetuate injustice. How the way the system is structured just keeps injustice going. It talked about how the GDP worked, how money is being made from people being sick, from people dying, from war, from all kinds of things. Money is being made, and people have financial interest in keeping those things going. They don't necessarily always have the financial incentive to actually solve the situation, and that's how the system is structured. And if that's the seed, that's the structure that you use, you're not going to get there. You have to change the seed. So, the Zeitgeist movie also presented, I don't know if it is a solution, but certainly a way of looking at how we could do things differently. The Zeitgeist movie presented in the third movie this idea of, well, what if we were to look at the whole world, look at all the resources, all the natural resources in the world, and try and actually distribute it fairly. Try and actually live within those boundaries, the boundaries of our collective garden, and understand that need for renewal. Understand that need to keep planting seeds and not just consuming everything, but we have to keep planting for the future. We have to be willing to make sacrifices sometimes. We have to be willing to say, well, okay, we could plant all of these old seeds that we already have, that we've been using for decades, but if they're no longer working, we're going to have to find new seeds. And maybe we have less of them now. Maybe it means sacrificing, planting many seeds, but eventually this will grow into a beautiful flower. So the Zeitgeist movie presented this idea of, okay, we have this whole world, and in it are all of these resources. And what if we were to just say, okay, this is what we've actually got. This is how much we can use in a year as we also keep renewing things. And so that's the boundaries. That's the amount that we've got. We've got to live with that. We've got to work with that. And so this wave of the wizard and the seed is also about saying, okay, if you have a physical planet, there are physical boundaries. We have physical bodies. And so what that means is you can't just perpetually keep growing. You can't have infinite economic growth. You also can't have infinite population growth either. You have to understand we have physical boundaries, and we know what happens with other creatures when their population grows too big. Something comes around to rebalance it. Nature, the immune system of the planet, viruses, microbes, they come in to rebalance that. what also happens in large populations of animals that get too much out of hand, they destroy their local environment. They get many sick and weak creatures. They don't thrive anymore when the population gets so big. And nature always rebalances. If there's a lot of mice, then there's more owls, right? If there's way too many butterflies sitting really close together, a virus comes in and the population falls, and otherwise they would have eaten up the whole forest, right? Now, when it comes to humans, we find this a little bit more difficult. But we find ourselves in a world that is, in my opinion, overpopulated. And certainly a world where humans are living in a way that's out of alignment, where humans are living in a way that doesn't keep us strong and healthy and vibrant, and in a way where we therefore become vulnerable to microbes, to outside problems, but also inside problems. And so what the movie talks about a lot is this culture, this value system that keeps the unjust economic system going, that keeps the injustices around the world going. That it is through our common context, through the stories of what is supposed to be normal, that we keep the injustice going. And it's a path to self-destruction. This wave is Goal World Bridger, and the World Bridger originally was known as death. And so it's like a path heading towards death. And yet, of course, it's not just death. It's about a healthy balance between life and death. And so it's just as much goal life, right? It's about finding that healthy balance. And we have to find that healthy balance by letting go of what needs to die. Letting go of the old that is no longer working within us. Letting go of the pieces within ourselves, within our identity, within our stories, our culture, that are no longer working. Letting go of the pieces that we got from our upbringing, from our culture, that are no longer the seeds we want to keep planting. So I remember when I was in high school, and this was already before I saw these movies, I was 15 and I had learned some things about the injustices of the world, about the t-shirts and the chocolate and the way that these things are produced, you know. And I struggled with responsibility because I felt like I'm contributing to these neo-colonial injustices. And how do we stop that? And I didn't know how to do that. I wasn't making the financial decisions, and my mother tried, of course, as well. But I mean, it's just really difficult, is it? That's something I learned when I got older. It's difficult to make all the great consumer choices in this system full of craziness. Now, like I said, I had learned about these things, and I was in school, and I was like, well, why am I supposed to learn about all of these things here in school when there's way more important things, and adults don't seem to be very concerned about fixing it? I remember when my history teacher taught me that capitalism is basically always democratic, and that communism is basically always a dictatorship. And I was like, that's some really interesting capitalist propaganda. I didn't want to write that down in my book. I got in trouble for that. Yeah, that was nice. Eventually, I turned 18, and, I'd spoken with a lot of people because I didn't really want to be in school. and I wanted to do something more useful. And I spoke with lots of people in my surroundings, adults as well as peers, but mostly adults, and they all seemed to kind of agree, like, yeah, the system is kind of unjust, and yeah, the school system is kind of also pretty broken, and yeah, it's not really focused on learning and teaching you the best things. It is kind of sort of getting that piece of paper, but you kind of just have to get that piece of paper because that's what you need in order to go out into this world and make money. And yeah, it should be better, but it's difficult. We try to vote for better political parties, but it's just difficult. That's just the way it is. So you just have to get that piece of paper. And I didn't really like that story. And I realized that I don't know what I realized when I was 15, but looking back at it now, I can see it in a bigger context. I felt like I don't want to perpetuate a system that everybody agrees is broken and just say, well, but we kind of just have to move along with it anyways. And looking back, I can see the parallel with World War II, where people always say, why did people go along with it? Why didn't everybody see that it was unjust and therefore decide not to comply? Now, I'm not saying the schooling system is like World War II, though I remember that it felt like prison and that I didn't like that I was not allowed to leave and my parents could basically get locked up if I were to not go to school. But anyways, it's not like World War II. The point is, it's the same pattern. Back in World War II, people went along with injustice because they didn't know how to make the change. They didn't know what the alternative was. They were scared to death about being the one who didn't comply. And here we were, and there was not the same war-like situation, but people were still continuing to perpetuate a system that they thought was broken, going along with something they thought was broken. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. If we are going to create a new world, if we are going to create change, if we are going to get forward in life, we're going to at some point have to say, I'm not complying with something that everybody agrees is broken. At 17, Occupy came around, and I was like, wow, the revolution is here. We can stop this now. Great. And then, there was like 5 of us, and we got to talk with a few hobos, which was great. But, yeah, nobody came. And I remember there were polls saying 40 to 50 to 60% of the population agreed with the Occupy activists. And we had lots of wonderful people bringing us cookies and giving us bread. But there were still only 5 people in my town. It was fun. But Occupy was, to me, a way of saying, the system is broken. Let's all acknowledge the system is broken, and let's talk about how we can build a new system. Let's talk about how we can build a new society. How can we do it again? Occupy was inspired by the Arab Spring, where people came together on a square, and they started building a new economy, basically. They started making food on the street. They started organizing themselves on that street. They started setting up tents and living there and trying to talk about how are we going to, what do we want our country to be governed by? And Occupy tried to do that too, I guess. But we didn't know, and that was one of the things that that people didn't like. We don't have a solution yet. We're just here to acknowledge that there's a problem. And what I saw then is the newspaper started talking about where are we going to go beyond capitalism. And that was a big shift. A shift that the Zeitgeist movies were also part of, I would say, in bringing us to that point of acknowledging this system is no longer working. And Occupy said the same thing. This system is not working. And then the newspaper started talking about this. This economic system is not a fair system. It's not working. And this is where that role of the whistleblower, that role of this wizard to world leader wave comes in, pointing out what is there and saying, this is not working. We got to go move on to something new. And even if you don't know yet what that new thing is, you have to say, well, this is not it. I'm going to go look for something new. The world bridger is a traveler without identity, without position, who does not have this one political side. They're just walking, trying to find new identities, trying to find something new, but understanding that whatever is the old needs to be let go of, and we need to be open to something new. And sometimes that's exactly what we need to do in our lives, is to just say, well, I can see what's not working. I can see what I don't want anymore, and I'm going to let go of that. I'm going to keep moving towards something new and away from that which is no longer working. And along the way, I'll figure out what is going to work, what I do want. And so that's where we are in the energies right now. We're in the first castle of figuring out who we want to be, of figuring out our new way of life. And so in this wave, we're just figuring out what's not going to be coming with us and where are we headed. But we don't have to know exactly. We just start moving, right? We just start moving into the new. And we will figure out in the next couple of waves, in the next month, more about where are we headed. What do we want to step into? What beautiful new seeds do we want to plant? What beautiful new world are we creating together? So, I'm glad to have you with me on this journey of building a beautiful new world, of building a beautiful new life. So, let's go have fun this week, this wave, which is 2 more days, 3 more days. And I'll see you in the next episode.